everyone. My name is Rebecca, and I am a school psychologist in Lower Connecticut, and I'm here talking with our friend Eric Elias, who is a school psychologist also in Connecticut, in Central Connecticut, who has been working in the field for 26 years. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you today about your column in Communication Matters this month in December. Can you tell us a little bit about the story for those who haven't read the column yet?
Sure. The impetus behind the column was basically to talk about building capacity for behavior support. So we've had a number of books that are hitting the field from authors like Ross Greene and Paul Tough, talking about resilience and how to reach students who have significant behavior issues and what kinds of things work. And I hear from teachers as well as school psychologists that we're not always prepared for the behavior issues. So our grad programs focus on, if you're an educator, teaching methodologies, if you're a psychologist, assessment, and maybe counseling theories. But when we're in the thick of it, behavior kind of hits us hard, and we're not always prepared for it. And what I'm hearing from teachers and psychologists is that the behavior issues that they're dealing with often can push them toward burnout. So my concern, and one of the things that I thought was important in my own building, was to figure out ways to support the teachers and the students in ways that were effective. So a little bit of experimentation was utilized, and to let people know, I've been in the same building for 20 years. So I have experience with the teachers, I have rapport, I believe I have trust. So my relationship with them is maybe a little more experienced than somebody who's new, or somebody who is transferring into a building, something like that.
Absolutely. But I see, yeah. I like what you're saying, because I think a lot of us can relate to that situation and wanting to be really helpful, especially in this tricky area of challenging behavior in the classroom, seeing the need for and the value of our role and effort to help teachers with that. And you were lucky enough to have these long relationships with teachers. But what were the biggest challenges that you faced? I know it wasn't in the relationship or in the trust, but were there some challenges or barriers to your idea?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say a number of things. One was really to pinpoint what we're going to do, because it's easy to be reactive, maybe as a school, certainly as individual practitioners, and somehow or other we have to get to the point where we're proactive in order to tackle these issues. So my building has a strong PBIS program, so we were pretty fortunate to have that group of teachers as sort of our ally, as sort of our base, in order to begin working with a group of teachers in order to tackle the problem. So the first thing we started to address was what issues are we going to deal with? And one of the things we had was a number of kids who were eloping from the classrooms. So these are my kids who are probably all on the counseling list for me, the guidance counselor, the social worker, that sort of thing. And they would get frustrated, fed up. Maybe the interaction with the adult and child was negative, and the kid might react and just bolt. What happens with that in any school setting is it's an emergency, right? Everyone has to figure out where this kid is. Are they leaving? You know, are they safe? So you end up scrambling, and you have to be reactive to that. And we had probably, I'm going to say maybe 5 to 7 students who were doing that on a regular basis. So that sort of put us all in the scrambling mode on a, 2, 3, 4 times a week. So that was one issue that we decided we needed to address. Along with that were a couple other issues, the child-adult relationships, how are people responding and reacting to these kids? So really what we wanted to do was to develop maybe a more trauma-informed approach but also give the kids some place to go. So my initial thought was, if students have a safe place to go, if these kids are reacting based on that fight or flight approach, then if they have a place to go that's in the classroom that's safe, they might not bolt as quickly.
Sure, what a great idea. And as
So,
you're developing that idea, did you have key allies? It sounds like you were meeting and discussing the situation and the problem as a group. Who were your key allies in developing the plan?
yeah. So initially, I had an intern that year whose name is Catherine Grava, who's a fantastic school psychologist in on the shore in Connecticut. And she and I think initially were talking. She came up with one idea, I came up with another, sort of separate from one another. And we talked, and she was initially thinking these kids needed some sort of calm down kit in the classroom. So she was sort of the first ally. We were working together. And then we presented to the PBIS committee, which consisted of, I want to say, about 10 teachers in our building. And the PBIS committee was all for developing these safety corners. We eventually called them calm down corners. And so what we did is rolled them out a little bit at a time. So the handful of classrooms that had students that were really escalated, they got calm down kits. My intern created these beautiful calm down kits with stress balls and laminated coping strategies. And so initially we had that group of teachers who were basically saying, yeah, we need help with these kids. Let's partner together and do something. So they were pretty willing participants.
Sure. And what was your approach to explaining the model, how to get the kids into the what language to use?
That's a great question. We did want to try to be specific. And initially it was meeting with a teacher or two one at a time to say, you know, Jimmy's really having a tough time. You notice that he's running out of the room. He can't handle disappointment. So we started talking about ways to turn things around so that the relationship was positive. And our teachers were pretty good at saying, yeah, you know, I'm beginning to see the same thing. I'm seeing that, you know, I might reprimand or correct him. And even if it's a gentle correction, the kid, you know, explodes and takes it out the door. So teachers were pretty self-reflective. And I think that's a tough thing. And not that teachers aren't self-reflective, but when we're dealing with behaviors, we sometimes take the behavior personally. We sometimes take the interactions personally. And it's really time for all of us to come together and say, let's be self-reflective. What can we each do or change with this kiddo to make this work?
That's true.
And I think once people are frustrated enough with the behavior, everybody is willing to come to the page and say, this isn't working.
Yeah.
So
we'll try something different, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say that the key teachers were the ones who had the 5 to 7 teachers who had kids eloping frequently, were our sort of our test group.
Sure.
And my intern and I went into classes with a book to read, the kit to share, and basically showed the students and teachers how to use it, asked the teachers to designate a place in the classroom that would be safe, and had the kids agree that they would use that, practice it. So some of these kids had behavior point sheets, and so instead of focusing on maybe respect for school or respect for others or something on the sheets, we started reinforcing the use of the calm down kit and strategies. So we're teaching the skill, reinforcing the skill.
That's great. Did you, I'm curious, did you, once you practiced with the class and explained it to the kids and they had started using the corner, the calm down space, how did you have a timer? How did you get them then to come back?
That's a great question. And I think that's the fear that, you know, you're going to lose the kid and that's the day. That's it. Typically, our teachers have been pretty good about saying, you know, you got 5 minutes. some of the teachers put little sand hourglass timers that, you know, had 3-4 minutes on them in the kit, and for the most part, nobody really abused it. And I think this is a key issue for everybody in education, is engagement versus control. And I think when we are looking at our relationship with the kids, if I'm engaging the child in the activity that I'm doing, I'm going to be less inclined to try to control that child to do what I want them to do. And so most of the teachers were great at re-engaging the child back to the activity they needed them to do. And most of the kids were very happy to, you know, take 5 and just relax. If things had, you know, escalate beyond that, of course, then we would be available. That same team that sort of scrambled to go find the kid, somebody would go into the room and support the child too.
It's a fantastic idea, and I love that that notion of engagement versus control, and also making explicit that conversation with teachers, because I can imagine that that is a fear that teachers might have, that now I'm going to lose this kid all day and he's just going to stay there all day, and then what am I going to do? So I like that point a lot. How are you measuring your success, the success of this program?
That's a great question, because we are data-driven in just about everything we do in school psychology. Typically, the eloping from the classroom would constitute an office referral. So it was pretty easy to measure the frequency of elopement. And so we really just looked for a reduction in that elopement. And once we saw with a handful of kids that there was a reduction, the PBS committee was just thrilled. Other teachers were thrilled. So there was that contagiousness of success that happens. Like, oh, it's a great idea. Let's try it.
Right. That's fabulous. Did you have teachers that were using the Super 7, 5 to 7 teachers? Did you have them also do some consulting with other teachers?
Yeah. So once we had success with this, we presented to the PBIS committee, as I mentioned, and from there, our administrator and the committee just wanted us to roll it out to the entire building. So we had people sort of, you know, testify, so to speak, at a faculty meeting, and everybody got excited. And our PBS committee teamed up with my intern to build the calm down kits for every classroom, all the special area teachers. So everybody has a designated area and a kit in their classroom. And they've been in place for about 2 years now, I think, or 1.5 years.
Wow, it's so fabulous. Such a simple yet effective intervention, such a great strategy. I love how you connected it to your existing PBIS priorities, and helped those kids that needed to take a break feel as though they could do that. They could regulate their own emotion and they could bring themselves back. And it was not about being punished for having a hard time. It was just about learning to take the break that you need and re-engage. It's so wonderful. How did you notice that this effort and this whole plan, as it was rolling out and becoming apparently very successful to everyone, that it also, that the entire effort increased your leadership in other areas of the building, your intern and yourself, or the PBIS team? That's
a great question. And I think, yes, I would say the initial answer is yes. We tend, in my building at least, my experience has been, and I think this is probably true with education, things sort of roller coaster a little bit. So as we've increased our number of students, our general population, we've also had a sort of increase of new teachers, and our focus last year on PBIS waned a little bit, just by the nature of being busy with other things, and our data changed. So we noticed some behaviors increasing, and so we really had to, PBIS committee, not just as a school psychologist, but this the end of last year had to become more self-reflective, like, well, what happened? We had a lot of really good things in place. What do we need to do now? What has changed, and how can we, circle the troops and reassess what we need? So, as a school psychologist, I think teachers look to me to have some insight into trauma-informed support for kids, mindfulness support for teachers in classrooms who are starting to look into that more, as well as general behavioral support. I mean, that's part of my role. I'm in one building by my, full-time in one building. So, so my leadership, I think, is looked to in terms of, the PBIS committee, the support with that, and my role on that committee. I'd say it's established because I've been there for so long, but I have to continually reassess. As I mentioned, with data changing last year, how can I support it in a different way? How can I look at the data? How can I support the team? Where do we go this year?
Sure. And as you're looking at that data and collecting it, are you using it to make your case to the committee, to your administration, to the teachers? How are you using that?
That's a good question. So we do use the PBIS Swiss data program, and that tracks office referrals. So we, on a monthly basis, as a PBIS committee, look at that data. So one of my roles on the committee is to make the data available prior to our meetings, and then to present the data at the monthly meeting. So we are taking a hard look at where our behaviors are increasing, what setting, what behaviors are increasing specifically. So is it aggression? Is it defiance? And then what we can do about that. So we're pretty good as a team at looking at that data. And I would say to anyone who doesn't have a strong team, that maybe you could be the person of change, be the change you want to be, sort of thing, as they say. That, looking at that data, if you don't use Swiss, what are the number of office referrals in your building? Where do the behaviors seem to be most concentrated? Is it the classroom? Is it less structured settings, cafeteria, gym? And then what we do with that is we develop lessons. So as a team, we determine, okay, it's aggressive behavior this month. We will develop some lesson plans for the teachers, and then email them as a group to the school and say, our administrator is very supportive, and we'll say, within the next month, I expect that you'll be able to implement these lesson plans twice. And then the guidance counselor and I are available to go into classrooms and provide additional support, and the PBS team members will do the same thing. So that might mean reading a book and having a class discussion, something like that.
Sure. It sounds like great collaboration in your building, that you're all working together really nicely. And Eric, thank you so much for this, because it makes me feel like I see this whole, I'm sure that it took time and it was a stepwise progression towards its success, but I see this whole plan as something that I could possibly try to implement in my building. And I think I understand the steps of it. I really appreciate that. 26 years of experience is no small beans.
Well, thank you.
It's wonderful. So this is a question that I hadn't thought of before, but it's making me think. It's a questions that I read on a blog that I follow, Humans of New York, and he asked people, if you could give one piece of advice to a large group of people, what would it be? And so, with all your experience and wisdom in the field, what would be your kind of major suggestion or advice to all of us school psychologists out here?
That's a good question. Wow.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, hey, that's why I'm here, right? I think, honestly, the key word I would say is collaborate. And you and I know, have talked about the "none of us is skilled as all of us" quote, and shared that quote. And that's really it. I think the behaviors lead to, certain behaviors I might take personally, certain behaviors might push a certain teacher's buttons, and they're tough.
Yeah.
And so I think the more we collaborate together and the more we're willing to be self-reflective, when a teacher might say to me, this kid really needs this approach. When you're working with my student, can you really focus on that? I need to be willing to accept that. And likewise, when a teacher is having a tough time and says, I need your help, how can I collaborate with them and help them be self-reflective? I always tell my teachers I have the utmost respect for what they do, because I couldn't be in a classroom with 26 kids,
Yeah.
I'll take them 3 at a time. Thank you. So really respecting them and that collaboration process, knowing that I can only support them, and they're the people out there doing the day-to-day work. So being willing to listen and supporting together.
I love that. I think that's great. And I think that really is what leadership is about, adding your unique skill set to the collective skill set, working together to ensure the best outcomes for students. That's really beautiful and a wonderful way to wrap up. So Eric, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your column. We all really enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you on the web and anywhere else you may pop up.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. My pleasure.
Thanks, Eric. Bye, everyone.